Hello. I felt like talking about Season 2 of the Cuphead Show, and that's what I'm going to do right now. If you're not familiar with who I am or my previous work, I talk a lot about animation, and I also talk about media and pop culture in a broader context, get into some analysis work as well. And I have previously talked about the Cuphead Show. I was initially pretty critical of it, to be honest. You can go ahead and watch some of my earlier videos about the show. And then when Season 1 of the show actually released, which I think was back in February, unless it was last year and I've gotten completely lost in the time warp here. Upon watching Season 1, I was less critical. I made a video where I just said, I'm kind of disappointed in mainly the fact that this seems like it's designed from square one for a very young viewing audience, and that felt like a missed opportunity to me because it's not just little tiny kids who like Cuphead. Everybody likes Cuphead, including a massive adult audience of players and people who are really ravenous to watch the show. And I don't feel like it almost feels like they weren't aware of the fact that anyone over the age of 12 cares about Cuphead. That's the decision they made. It's not a decision I agree with. It doesn't make this a terrible show by any stretch. However, for me, as a person in their late 20s who really enjoys animation and enjoys the original Cuphead game, largely for its animation, especially the bosses, I find very little to actually engage me here. I feel similarly about the show, having just watched Season 2, and I'd like to get into some more specific talking points because there is plenty of good here, but I also have a number of criticisms. First and foremost, and this really jumped out at me, and I don't think this was something that I paid attention to very much when watching Season 1, but after Season 2, I don't think the show is very funny, and I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be funny. In fact, this is not something I usually do, but I did capture some reaction footage of me watching one of the episodes of Season 2, and you can take a look at it right here.
I want to go to the amusement park.
And I want to go to the movies.
Amusement park.
Movies.
Amusement park.
Movies.
And again, I know I'm not the intended audience, but we know that this show is very clearly homaging what we could call vintage American animation. Now, I think it's an important distinction here that the show seems to me to be homaging mid-20th century American animation as opposed to 1920s and 30s American animation, which was what the game focuses on, both in terms of look and technical execution and character designs, all that stuff. We do have the same character designs here in the show, but in terms of the gags, the sense of humor, the physical comedy, it feels so much more like Looney Tunes stuff, Hanna-Barbera cartoons, as opposed to early Walt Disney and Fleischer cartoons. That's a choice right there. It's not one that I actually disagree with at all. I think it's A-okay. However, when I go back and watch Looney Tunes, when I go back and watch Tom and Jerry, I think we can draw a lot of comparisons to Tom and Jerry specifically with the Cuphead Show. A lot of it still holds up. A lot of the physical comedy, the violence, the gags, the ideas, it still really works for me, and I will laugh. I will laugh watching those old cartoons, and even though the spirit is here sort of in the Cuphead Show, especially in Season 2, it never quite clicked. It only ever felt like homage as opposed to doing its job of being comedic or overly clever. I didn't feel that most of the time. I didn't find myself laughing at all. I didn't find myself engaged in character dynamics, and not that there's much to engage with here to begin with. Another major choice with the adaptation of the show here is that they really just focus on Cuphead and Mugman as rascally brothers who are always fighting and stuff, and they have slightly different personalities, and they're supposed to be going on adventures. They go on a couple of adventures in this season. Last season, it really seemed like there were just so many episodes in the house that weren't very interesting to me. Season 2, they at least go a couple of places. One of the episodes features one of the famous bosses from the original game, but I like it when they actually went places and interacted with other characters who weren't regulars. I don't care about Elder Kettle. Unfortunately, I don't really care about Ms. Chalice either, who just kind of shows up whenever she wants and sort of hints at an overarching storyline, but we only get that continuous storyline for a couple of episodes here and there, both in Season 1 and Season 2, which in my mind makes me think of the another Netflix original animated series called Disenchantment from Matt Groening. It frustrates me so much with that show where it's literally the first 1 or 2 episodes of each season and then the last 1 or 2 episodes of each season is where they dig into some overarching storyline, and everything else is just one-off garbage where you're not invested and the stakes aren't very high, and then it's over, and I just don't. It's taken literal years and years and years to get any kind of progression of that storyline in Disenchantment, and it seems like almost an identical structure here. Every once in a while they'll contribute to that storyline, but otherwise it's just these really very stupid and childish scenarios, basically, where you know how it's going to end as soon as it's introduced. And again, it all comes back to the the fact that they're making the show for a very young audience, so I don't have much to grab onto here. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that this is out and out terrible entertainment for children, although I do think there are better options out there for sure. But something that I've gone on about so many times here on the channel is the concept of adult-friendly animation. Sorry to the regulars for bringing it up yet again and explaining it, but basically it's a sort of genre of animation that works equally well for audiences of all ages. Like it has something for everybody, and so many studios and channels and even online animators have just absolutely nailed that style. It's not that new anymore, and it can be done with just fantastic execution and humor and writing, and we're not getting that here. It was a conscious choice on the part of the team behind the show to not do that, to just make something that feels like it's only for very young kids. My mind was not changed by season 2 in basically any way. I didn't feel like it was developed in any interesting ways. I didn't feel like they were making any effort to reach out to a slightly older audience. So in a way, I feel funny for watching it at all, but I see plenty of other people talking about it. Plenty of other full-grown adults, plenty of other animation-focused channels are talking about the show. Sorry, I know it's been a lot of negativity so far, but I do want to touch on probably the biggest positive of the Cuphead Show overall that spans both seasons is just the actual animation. If you look past the filters, which I hate the film grain filter, I hate the film scratch filter, I think it's incredibly distracting and completely unnecessary. Nope, just bad choice. The way they executed it, all bad. Nope. But underneath that all, the actual animation work here is very good. It's very good. Clearly, it's a very skilled team, and they're doing a great job with what they've been given. They are coming up with some neat ideas. A lot of them are borrowed or outright cribbed from older cartoons, but either way, it looks very good. Just visually, it's a really neat show, and I appreciate that so much. And honestly, if they release more, I don't see myself covering it. It just feels a little bit silly. I don't know, it almost feels like deciding to talk about Caillou in depth, which you could maybe do as a gag, but it's absolutely not made for me. I don't feel myself especially drawn by any particular element. I do like the visuals themselves, I do like the animation itself, but beyond that, it's just kind of confusing to me in so many of the choices they've made in the process of adapting this property. And probably the biggest baffling decision to me, aside from the target audience, is that they're not focusing on the characters going on adventures. They go on a couple of adventures here and there. They do go to other places. I guess they technically do things and maybe fight someone here and there, sort of. But why couldn't that be the whole show? What about if it was made like a shonen style anime, not visually, but in terms of story structure, where they're constantly fighting and they have people knocking down their door to show up for a fight, and they have to be ready. They have to take on the task, and we get to see some great action. We know the team's capable of doing that sort of thing, but instead, we just get these incredibly bland mini stories that have no impact on the next episode. And then, there's kind of a story thing going, and Ms. Chalice stuff is there, and that's kind of it. Just confusing to me. It just feels like a giant pile of missed opportunities. I don't know. We have so many other shows that we can point to that have done a much better job of welcoming in a much broader audience and delivering a lot of substance in the process. Even if we just look to other animated Netflix shows, Centaur World. In fact, I might be doing a whole video on Centaur World soon because I have completely come around on that show. Like, I was very critical of it at first, and since then, I think I've only become more and more appreciative of how much work that show does and how memorable it can be, whereas season 2 of Cuphead, I am already struggling to think of specific scenarios and scenes and characters that were shown in season 2, and I just watched that a couple hours ago. It's just not there. It's leaking right out of my head, and that's usually not a great sign for longevity. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Feel free to share your thoughts. Thanks for stopping by.